Hello and welcome to the Marketplace of Tomorrow with President and CEO Marta Tellado. My name is Mary Esther, Director of Individual Giving. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to Consumer Reports. We are recording this presentation, so you are on mute, but you can ask questions. Some of you sent us some great questions beforehand, which we will get to. And I encourage other people to type your questions in the chat. So look for the chat icon at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible. And we will monitor the chat for technical issues as well that you may have. And now I will turn it over to our fantastic host, Elliot Wheeler, our digital lifestyle editor here at CR. Elliot?
Mary, thank you so much. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're living. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Elliot Wheeler. I'll be with you for the next half hour, coming from my home to yours. And of course, I want to echo Mary's thanks to all of you for your support and for joining us today. You are members of the President's Circle, the Legacy Society, and CGA donors. Your tremendous support and your commitment to CR is appreciated day in and day out. You are at the heart of our mission to create a more just and fair marketplace. We are here to talk about the marketplace of tomorrow with our CEO, Marta Tellado. Let's start there with what we hope is a quick, fun, anonymous poll, and it's a pretty easy one. How long have you been a CR member? You should be seeing it on your screen right now. We'll be very interested to see how long you've been supporting CR. Less than 5 years, 5 to 10 years, or more than 15 years. This was not necessarily a surprise, and we very much appreciate it. I like to see how these come in. So again, if you'd like to participate with us, this is an anonymous poll. We're just very curious as a nice way to level set and start our conversation today. Less than 5 years, 5 to 10, or more than 15, and a whopping 80% of you have been with us for more than 15 years. And that is remarkable. And as a CR employee for about 5 years, let me just say thank you for your support and for helping us out. Marta, I know you would probably like to echo that as well. It's a tremendous support for them.
Bravo, fabulous. And I'm not surprised. Your loyalty is one of our biggest strengths.
Terrific. Well, Marta, thank you so much for your time today. We look forward to having a robust conversation with you. Again, we would welcome the folks on the Zoom with us to insert any questions you have in the chat. We'll get to as many of them as possible, but let's get going right away, Marta, with the importance of trust and why that is such an important element of a fair and just marketplace.
Well, that's a marvelous question. And I first want to say hello and welcome to all our philanthropic partners and the many people that really make it possible for us to do what we do and gives us the longevity and the relevance after 80 plus years. I will say that Elliot is much too modest. When Elliot is not with us, he's off on television doing Good Morning America or the Today Show and doing quite a bit. So Elliot, it's a pleasure to be here with you as it is to be with all of you. I wish we could all be together and be close and be talking and gathering around a table, perhaps with a cup of coffee. But what I most want to convey is that I hope that you're safe and that I hope you're healthy. And what I can assure you is that 500 plus of CR's employees are also safe and healthy. And you know that since March, we've been working virtually. We have not missed a beat. We are completely caught up in all the backlog of our testing when we had to leave our Yonkers facility. But I think trust also relates to us internally with our team. Before I address it on such a big stage, I just want to say that we have done such a terrific job because the team really trusts the protocols and what we have been able to put in place for them to feel safe in the labs, and to do that and to be informed by the science of what we know is happening with this pandemic. So I am very proud that we have not had illnesses at CR, and we continue to live by the science that keeps our team healthy and strong. And that breeds more trust for the work that we do, the team that we have, and all the things that we're balancing. Imagine most of my team right now is working from home, trying to help Zoom teach their children. I, for one, have also been caretaking for my parents who are 90 plus years old and who lived in the same building as I did in Manhattan. And so we all had to leave. And here I am in upstate New York. We're all doing the best we can. So safety first, and trust has to underscore that. I think what we're all experiencing is something that CR loyalists have always known. And that is that trust is the bedrock of so many things. And it has been the bedrock of CR for 80 plus years. And that is why during this incredible period, during the pandemic, we have seen record numbers of people come to us for information that they could trust. Because what we're seeing is that trust today, and when you're in an environment where safety is so important, misinformation has taken on a whole new meaning. And the internet, which is the marketplace of the future, is a place that is not as transparent and obvious to us when we're there. And so having to parse the information that we see and the misinformation we see to help us make the right decisions for consumers is even more important and more relevant than it's ever been for CR. And I think that trust for us, and you all know this because you've been with us for 15 plus years, it really hinges on the strength of our independence. The fact that we have never and never will accept advertising. I think that continues to be so rare in the online platforms that we see. And so when we saw 18 million plus people come to us in March looking for information, I think it was because we continue to maintain that trust. And it is informed by the technologists, the researchers, the advocates, the scientists, the investigative reporters that all work at CR. And we're all driven by revealing the hunger and the voraciousness that we have to reveal truth, and to reveal that truth to consumers so that they can make terrific decisions in the marketplace. So it doesn't stop there, right? We do what we do because you make it possible, but consumers also have a role to play in some of the choices and the trust that we can build on a mutual level. So a lot to be said about trust, Elliot, and really is heightened in this period where safety is so prominent.
All right, let's get a little personal now. Some folks on the Zoom might know a little bit about you, Marta, but some may not. You have been working on consumer power and fairness for a great deal of your career. Talk to us about that journey and why it has been so important to you.
Well, I've been at CR now. It's going to go on 7 years, which is pretty remarkable. And when I got the call, I had spent, well, first let me backtrack and say public service has always been the driving force in my life. And I think it really, it's something that I wish I could take a lot more credit for, but I also think it was something that was talked about at the kitchen table when I was a kid. And that's because I came to this country when I was 2 years old. My parents left Havana because it was no longer a place that allowed for us to exercise our freedom to vote, our freedom to speak, our freedom to practice religion. And so I was always reminded that the reason I am here is because of an idea of value. This great idea that we call democracy and the values that energize it. And the fact that it is ephemeral, it is something that we have to contribute to and we have to engage in. And so this notion of giving back and serving the public interest has always been the driving force for me. So initially, Elliot, I spent my time in government service. I was very proud to work for our local U.S. senator in DC. But then I also spent a good deal of my time in the nonprofit sector around trying to inspire young people to join public service because we need their useful enterprise more than ever in some institutions which really need some updating and need to be ready for the marketplace of tomorrow. And so that is something that has always inspired me. So I think for me, this was when I got the call to come to CR, it felt like I was coming full circle because my internship in college was with Ralph Nader. And I saw him debate on television. And I picked up the phone and I called Public Citizen and I organized an internship for myself. It didn't pay anything, but I thought I have got to go and spend time understanding the facts, understanding how to create a fair and just marketplace. And he was a terrific mentor. Everything they say about him is absolutely true. He is singular, but what a tremendous work ethic. He was always digging deeper and trying to find the facts and substantiating those facts and relentless in his commitment. So I learned a lot about consumer rights with him, but what an opportunity to come to Consumer Reports, an organization that is so trusted, continues to be so iconic, but has to be ready and relevant for the marketplace of tomorrow. When we transition from an analog world where products are breaking, but now a connected Internet of Things world where the software running through our products is being updated and downloaded sometimes without even our knowledge or permission. So a lot to be gained, but a whole set of consumer issues that we have to wrestle with. So what inspired me was that we're on the frontier of the next generation of consumer protection.
Well said. And I should tell you, it was funny that you mentioned the connected devices. Just about 3 hours ago, an appliance repair person left my apartment after I got the error codes on a washing machine through my cell phone and sent them to the repair. So it is pretty remarkable what you're able to do. But with that comes great responsibility as well. So Marta, you mentioned that you've been at CR now about 7 years, and there have certainly been some major and often very visible transformations in that time, including something I know you're proud of. We are all proud of it and excited to be part of something we call the Digital Lab. Tell us about how that fits into your vision for the future of CR.
Well, that's what excited me so much when I met the board of directors and they asked me, the usual questions, what do you think we have to run after and why? And what is so urgent in our consumer marketplace today that we have to get out in front of? And I talked about the digital frontier and the digital marketplace. I said, so many of the consumer protections that you all have been a part of for so many years really don't apply to the digital world. I mean, that's something a lot of Americans don't know. Like the consumer protections, the laws that regulate the standards for products that are not digital do not apply to smart TVs and smartphones and our iPhones or whatever phone you're working on. It's kind of the Wild West. And what I mean by that is, take, for example, a smart TV. You go out and you buy a smart TV, and that's a TV that's connected to the internet, right? You can watch your Netflix, you can do a whole variety of things. You can watch Amazon Prime, music, you got it. But here's the thing. When you unpack that television, it is preset to allow for all manner of data to be pulled from what you're watching. And so think about it, it's not just the privacy, right? Because we now know that you buy a television because you want to watch it. You don't want it to watch you. So how do we secure the kinds of consumer protection so that you know that when you get that television, it's doing the right thing? And so that's why I always say, privacy in the digital world should be a right, not a setting. How did it turn into a setting that you are responsible for finding the setting on your smart products to ensure that you have privacy and control of the data? So in the absence of that, I said, we need, we have, 60 plus labs. We need to think about a lab that is completely devoted to the kinds of standards we need for the digital marketplace. And so we created something called the digital standard. And as you know, the beauty of Consumer Reports is the many levers that we have, right? We are advocates. We look at the kinds of assurances we can get from regulatory agencies, the laws, how to codify the things that we learned from our testing and our research. But in the absence, right, of a legislative mandate, because we know big tech is quite powerful and they've been given free rein to do these products and to set the standards that they believe they need to have to extract the data that they then monetize, is that one has to also incentivize the marketplace. We've always believed in that competition in the marketplace, but how do you incentivize digital standards? And so we came up with digital standards that should apply to connected products to ensure that you have more control, that you can't be hacked, and that your information is held private. And we started applying that to things like smart TVs. And lo and behold, as soon as we did that to smart TVs, security cameras, we started getting calls from the manufacturers saying, hey, wait a minute, you're rating us based on these standards? And we're like, yes, we are. And what started happening? They started addressing some of the problems. Samsung saw the problem in the television. They saw the problem. So there are ways to incentivize and to move markets. And the digital standard is one way of doing it. The other thing the digital lab has to do is we have to create tools for you, for consumers. And so I know we're going to talk about this a little later, Elliot, but the security planner is a new tool, a new way for you to just in a very painless way, go to the security planner on the site, and they ask you a series of questions. What kind of phone do you have? What kind of security level do you want to have? And they walk you through how do you have to do what you have to do, because there's an enormous amount of complexity and time that you have to spend. We want to try to minimize that. So there is an enormous amount to do on the digital front, but I think the digital lab is a way for us to really begin to turn the tide and really put consumers in the driver's seat in a digital age to make that market more transparent, safer, and more in the hands of what you need as a consumer.
And I just want to share a comment from Ryan Lester that popped up, and Ryan had submitted some questions that we'll get to a little bit later in our conversation here, but he makes a good point, and he says, and he reminds all of us that the terms of service and the privacy policies on these devices can change at any time, which of course we all know, right?
That's exactly right. And not only can they change at any time, but they're so arcane. I mean, we just give up. You go on a site and they say, check this box. Do you agree with the terms? And you just say yes, because you want to get to the thing you need to get to. And so there's a heck of a lot in the fine print. But think about how powerful it is when all of our searches, 90% of our searches online run through Google. Wow, that's extraordinary. That's extraordinary. They know an extraordinary amount about all of us. And who owns that data about us? Who owns that data about the purchases that you've made or the topics that you have been searching? All right, there are no real rules of the road on that. And what we also know is that 80% of American families are Amazon Prime members, right? That's remarkable. I'm one of those families. These are incredible tools for us, but it's on the consumer protection side, we've got work to do.
And Marta, you mentioned the security planner. We do have the screen up, and we'll of course send you the link to this. But if you have not checked this out, it is one of the most useful. I think it's easy, it's visually appealing, and it is kind of a step-by-step checkup, so that if you would like to modify your Facebook or your Twitter or other settings on your social media or other digital accounts, Consumer Reports has made it very easy with step-by-step instructions on how to do it. securityplanner.consumerreports.org, and we'll include that link in the email that we send following this webinar. It's a great tool. We launched it, about 2 weeks ago, I guess? Is that right? 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Yes. And I would love for you to try it because I need your feedback.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's really, really nice.
I
It's really
want to
nice.
hear what was useful, what wasn't useful. These are the new kinds of tools that we have to make available, so that this is really as frictionless and as easy for you as possible to have some sense of trust when you log on every day, about how secure and how private your connections are.
All right. And speaking of feedback, we have another poll. And I want to remind folks before we get to the poll, if you do have a question or a comment, it was great to hear from Ryan there. At the bottom of the screen on the Zoom, you'll see something that says chat. Just feel free to type it in there and we will get to it as soon as we can, as time allows. So here is our second poll question. Let me go ahead and launch this one for you. This kind of talks about the issues that are important to you. Which issues do you think are most consequential to consumers of today? Digital rights, which Marta just spoke about, financial fairness, food safety and health, sustainability, or all of the above? Yes, we did give you the options, since so many of these are weighty and we know very important to you. So think about in your life, your family's life, your friend's life, digital rights, financial fairness, food and safety, sustainability, or all of the above. And we'll just wait a few more seconds. It's just nice for us to be able to hear from you in one of these settings. All right. So perhaps not surprisingly here, all of the above, because these are all, of course, issues that touch all of our lives, and food safety and health.
You know what's so interesting about that answer, Elliot, is we just did some national research and polling, and top three, one of them right at the top of the list was food and water. Imagine in the United States, one of the top concerns for the general population is food and water, the safety of our water, whether it's coming out of a plastic bottle or the tap. And so that's why we have been devoting so much time to water investigations. And we have engaged with our members in those investigations, or we're going to continue to do that. Same with food safety, heavy metals in juices, arsenic in children's cereal. These continue to be an issue. And it's really about watchdogging some federal agencies that should be on top of this. But we're seeing that when we get engaged and when we do it, we see things happen. We saw it when we finally succeeded in getting the levels of arsenic out of baby rice cereal, and in line with the health standards. We saw it when we identified a level of arsenic in bottled water, and we were successful in getting those off the shelves. So it's unfortunate that we are worried about food and water, but we see that, and you're very much in line with what is on the minds of many consumers across the country. And it drives a lot of the work and the choices that we make about what we need to investigate.
Let's take another question from me, and then I'll get to some from folks that are joining us here. It sort of goes without saying here, the past week, the past few months, the past few years, certainly unprecedented times, lots of anxiety, lots of uncertainty. So how does CR's mission and our legacy position CR to meet this particular moment in time?
Let's go back to where you started, Elliot, on trust. Trust is the bedrock of our marketplace, but it's also the bedrock of democracy. And it's also the bedrock of how we get out from under this pandemic. We have to be able to trust, the science, the vaccine. We have to be able to trust the process by which we make choices. And so I think what we have tried to model as an organization for 80 years is the integrity of process, the integrity of facts. We have always absolutely cheered on what I think all CR members have, and that is healthy skepticism, right? That is what you've got to have healthy skepticism. You've got to arm yourself with the facts and the things you need to make choices for your family, to stay healthy, to have financial security. But there's also a sense that we have to be united around facts and what those facts are and how those facts and the science help us make decisions and research and be planful. So I think that distinction is a really important one. And I think I've been encouraged by the vote of confidence that a lot of members have in us, and a lot of new members that we've seen come since the pandemic struck that are coming to us and saying, I want to be part of this. And we weren't sure if this was just in the moment, but now we are actually seeing that there's some stickiness to it, that they are coming and they're saying, wait a minute, I do trust what you're saying. You're helping me. You're helping me translate the complexity and the uncertainty that's out in the marketplace. And I think we have to, we have to model that. I think that is extremely relevant. But the other thing I would say is that as much of the work that we do is so important, our power comes from our members, 6 million. It is very different to walk into an office and say, I think this consumer protection standard is weak, and show them the evidence. And it is quite amazing to see the jaws drop when we can walk into an office of a regulatory official and say, I have the following thousands, millions of consumers standing behind this. And they have their personal stories about what challenges they've had. And we've seen that again and again, whether it's with water safety, whether it's with furnitures that are tipping over on children because we do not we have voluntary standards when we know the physics of a piece of furniture and when it becomes dangerous. Why would we even think not to enforce those standards? Anything you bring into your home should be safe. And I think that has tremendous power. So what that says to me is that civic engagement is as important for consumer power as it is for our very democracy. And so I'm actually optimistic about the level of engagement that we're seeing, and the fact that you can make a difference and you can bend the market to fairness and justice with that engagement.
Great. All right, let's listen or take some questions from our members now. We've been listening throughout the webinar here. We got a few questions beforehand, so I'll start with those and then I'll move to a few that we have in the chat. And again, feel free to submit any if you'd like, and we'll try to get to them. If we don't answer them here, you will hear from us. Mary will respond, or Charmin or Olivia. You will get an answer. It just may not be here depending on how much time we have left. So here's the first one from Ryan Lester. Ryan says, with so many smart devices connected to the internet being sold these days that are vulnerable to abuse, is there any government or industry movement towards security standards for these devices?
Great question. And I touched on some of that, Ryan, earlier when I talked about that there is no standards. And that's why we stood up the Digital Lab and we came up with the open source protocols on digital privacy and control of your own data. So there's a lot of work to be done. I do think that the tide is turning, and that we are seeing more people, more consumers aware and demanding more control of their data. They are very aware of some of the things that are not transparent. So for example, dynamic pricing. Let's see a show of hands of how many folks on the screen in front of me, when I say dynamic pricing, what do you think? Raise your hand if you know what that means. Okay, all right. Well, guess what? That's horrifying. If you're going online and trying to book an airplane ticket, and the algorithm sees that you live in a certain zip code and that you shop for the following things, it provides information that says, you know what, this consumer is probably willing to pay this much as opposed to this much. And so that quote unquote dynamic pricing becomes a way to charge Roger one thing and Leslie another. Shocking. We need more transparency in the digital marketplace. And that is what we're fighting for and what we have to turn the tide on. We have more work to do. I think there is no mandate yet for that, but we have got to stay on that because that's just the tip of the iceberg.
All right, we have another question from George Jacro. I believe I'm saying George's last name correctly. George is in Hawaii, so we can all be jealous of that. Nice job, George. His question says, I'm concerned about the escalating national debt the U.S. is accruing. At some point, the rest of the international community will realize that we're living beyond our means. What scenario do you see as a reaction to this problem?
Wow, George, unfortunately, we're not alone in that problem, right? We have a global debt crisis. Many countries are faced with this now. And when you think about the debt and the trillions and trillions, it's the sort of the classic problem. It's sort of the political football, isn't it? Where you're trying to decide, do you address the trillions on the national debt side? And then when you look at all the things we've underinvested in, then the argument about, wait a minute, shouldn't we be investing in our infrastructure? Why are we so behind on artificial intelligence and science and STEM? And so then you're faced with this duality of, do you pay down the debt at 2 to 3%, or do you invest in some things? And then you get into an absolute fight of political wills. And that's sort of the deadlock we're in right now. And I would just say that it's the near term as well as the longer term. What in the near term do we need to be investing in? And then we as a country have to have that debate, right? About the deficit versus the near term things we need to invest in. No question that in the long term, we need to have a much healthier financial scorecard for this country and for the global economy. But we are also faced with a variety of things that we know is long overdue. So it's not an easy question for any of us. But I think one of the things that we can take heart in is that 2/3 of the GDP is consumer-driven product and consumer spending. When I look at that number, I think consumer power. That's us. That is us making decisions every day about things in the marketplace, right? We may think about voting 2-3 times a year, local and national, but we're in the marketplace every day representing that GDP. So we can make some choices that can bend the marketplace in a different way. So I think our consumer power has to be embedded in how we make those decisions about our national economy as well.
All right, we have a question that popped up in the chat from an anonymous donor about environmental impact and sustainability, which was one of our poll questions there. What is CR doing about it? Is it new? Will it be incorporated into product reviews and ratings? Go ahead and talk about that.
So in the past, as you know, it isn't new in the sense that we've always been really putting pressure for fuel efficiency in cars. For also efficiency in electronic products, and of course in our washing machines and dishwashers. We know now that you can get as clean a plate as you possibly can with perhaps using a little bit less water. So that's all about sustainability and being smart in the way we use our resources. But what's exciting is that we just got through a year of strategic planning. And one of the things that we were so inspired by when we went out to our members and to the general population about things that mattered and where we felt we could have an impact, a greater impact, is to lean in even harder on sustainability and think about where can CR make a huge difference on sustainability. So that level of engagement on sustainability is new for us. And so stay tuned for that, because we're in the process of coming up with the strategy, of identifying the kinds of resources that's going to take, and really getting behind and putting our shoulder into that. I think it's something all of you have said we need to look at. And I know it's something that is going to make a big difference for future generations. So we're excited to take that on.
Great. I want to also just mention in the chat here, Marta, that we have a lot of interest, it would seem, in the digital lab, the digital standard. We have a link in the chat. So if you would like to learn more about that, we're certainly thrilled that there's so much interest in this. Please take some time. It is its own sort of portal of information within the Consumer Reports website. You'll find a lot of useful information there on the lab, the digital standard that Marta talked about, and again, the security planner. Have your devices handy and follow our step-by-step guide there. And we think you'll find it useful, and ultimately you will hopefully add some useful protections for yourself and for your family and for those devices. So high interest for that, Marta, which is always good to see.
Well, I'm glad there's interest in that, because that's an issue I love talking about. And I think we have to evangelize on this, because not enough consumers are aware of what's happening. And Elliot, I saw another question that came into us about antitrust. And I raise it because it's directly related to the digital lab and the work that we're doing on connected products. And that's because, I think I remember the question. It was boy, a lot of these companies and platforms sure feel like monopolies to me. And so, wait a minute, what happened to antitrust, and what happened to competition and fair pricing? And I would say that hunch is spot on. That this is an old problem, but with a very new shape. Right. And so, just like the old antitrust issues around Standard Oil and some others, we have to level the playing field. But how do you do that? This is a very different problem. And so when you think about digital giants that we have now, the Amazons, the Facebooks, and their business models are very different. Right. And so I would say the other thing, too, when you think of antitrust, you think of pricing. And what's different about the level of monopoly power of these digital giants is that it isn't about their controlling of prices, right? Think about that. They're not just controlling their prices, they're controlling the realities that we experience when we search, right? When you're searching on Google and you look at those answers, for the most part, the results that you get are paid for by the answers you're seeing. Okay, that means advertising. Does that sound familiar? That is why CR was created 80 years ago, because of false advertising and false promises and non-transparency. Well, now you're on a platform that you think is just one big giant encyclopedia. It's not really. It's one big giant advertising platform. So how do you parse what is, real versus what's advertising? And Google gotten really smart at knowing that whatever appears on the top of your screen, you're going to be satisfied with, because their research says that your eye does not go beyond that first page. So to get to that first page, you have to pay for that. The higher you pay and bid on making sure that what you see is number 1, 2, and 3, that's advertising. That's pay to play. Shocking, quite shocking. But it's not size alone and the power of their platform that gives them the kind of monopoly power they have. It's the combination of things that they control and that they've got their hands in, right? Think about it. They are retailers. They are news aggregators. They are information gatekeepers. All these things, that's what they do. And there is a handful of them. So just today, there was an article in the paper about that, about, what happens to the antitrust, the big platforms, the Facebooks, the Apples, the others. I think the tide is turning. And I think the secret to our success is consumer power. And it's this waking up of what we have assumed has been putting people first, and what in fact is that they're putting profits first. And they're not being transparent about it. This is an opportunity for us to wrestle down and to get on the front lines of the next frontier of the things we have to fight for. And that's what really drives us right now. And we can't be asleep at the wheel. They have been given free rein. Unfortunately, our regulators, have not been up to speed in terms of understanding these business models and thinking about the kinds of regulations. Some countries across the ocean are a little further along than we are. And as we know, the digital marketplace has no boundaries. It is a global marketplace, so it is complex in that way. But it is absolutely, to the question that was raised, relevant to some of the older antitrust issues we've looked at, but with a very different face.
And Marta, as we wrap up, this is a good time to invite people to join our advocacy movement if they are so inclined. The website is in the chat here, advocacy.consumerreports.org. As Marta has mentioned throughout, this is the power of people. People and members are what get attention, and CR has a long history of that, and we would certainly invite you to be part of that as well. Marta, before I say thank you and goodbye to the folks that joined us today, I know you'd like to also say that, and with a special message as we look towards the end of this year.
It is. I mean, here we are. We have been trying to stay safe now for close to 9 months. For CR, that meant from March. And I just want to thank you all for staying engaged with us, for putting your trust in us, for thinking about the way in which we are trying to keep consumer issues on the forefront. We have a lot more work to do. I hate to share this, but many people do not even know we're not a nonprofit, right? They think we're this big behemoth publishing company, and when in fact, we're probably the most iconic social enterprise that is completely ad-free and still to this day a nonprofit organization. Everything we do gets pumped back into how we fight the good fight. And that only happens because of all of you. You know, you are our lifeline to the future. And so as you think about the end of this year and what I hope we have given to so many of the frontline battles we're fighting, I hope you think about us again and continue to think about us and continue to spread the word and evangelize how important it is to be part of a community like this that is fighting the good fight, and fighting the good fight from a place of independence and integrity that recognizes the importance of that. I think it's singular. And the fact that so many of you have been with us for so many years speaks to the fact that you recognize that. And so I just want to thank you for continuing to be part of this family, for knowing that it's an ongoing fight, for knowing that some of the problems that we're going to see come January are incredibly complex. But that doesn't mean we're going to shy away. It means we just have to lean in that much harder. And we can only do that with you. So I couldn't be in better company than with all the faces I'm seeing today. So thank you very much for joining me today, and for joining Elliot and Mary and everyone else who's working so hard.
Well, Marta, thank you for sharing a bit of your time. It's great to see you. I miss not seeing you in the office. It's been so long, but we see each other, and all of the folks joining us today via Zoom, and that's fine too, because we are safe and we're glad of that. So thank you. And this does conclude our very special conversation with Marta Tellado. We'll have more to look forward to. You'll be getting some emails from us with some of the things that we talked about in this webinar, and you're welcome to watch it again if you would like. And again, a special thank you to our donors. You keep us honest and independent, and we very much appreciate your partnership and your support. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.